Hello, and thank you for joining us for our Clerk Minute session today. My name is Tiara Earls-Haas, and I am the Communications Supervisor here at the Clerk of the Superior Court in Maricopa County. And this is the Clerk Minute. So the Clerk Minute is a platform that was created to provide a way for the Clerk of the Superior Court to engage movers and shakers in the Valley who are making a positive impact when it comes to improving and expanding access to justice. So in our first session, which was recorded last spring, we actually had the opportunity to interview Vice Chief Justice Ann Timmer, who shared some very incredible details on some of the work she and the Arizona Commission on Access to Justice are doing to make legal services more affordable and more available to more people. So if you haven't had the chance to watch that session, you can do so by searching for it on our Clerk of the Superior Court YouTube channel. We also have a link to that video on our video section of our website, so please go ahead and check that out if you haven't had the chance to do so. With that said, I want to speak a little bit about the emergence of the pandemic, because even though that sort of required us to pause our Clerk Minute sessions, it did give us the opportunity to share stories of resilience and impact, which is what we're actually going to be doing today. So with that said, I wanted to introduce today's guest, who is Judge Joseph Welty. He is the presiding judge of the Maricopa County Judicial Branch, and he will be sharing how the Superior Court navigated the pandemic and what the future holds for the Maricopa County judicial system. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Mr. Jeff Fine.
Today I'm online with Judge Welty, who serves as the head of the Judicial Branch for Maricopa County, and is someone that I have the opportunity to work with often as Clerk of the Court. Our teams work together in partnership, serving court customers and ultimately our community. While the Clerk's office has approximately 700 employees and is responsible for managing records, evidence, and financial operations, for example, the scope of what the presiding judge oversees is even greater. Judge, it is absolutely a pleasure to work with you and great to have you with us today. Could you share with us a little bit about what it's like to serve as the presiding judge?
Well, first, Jeff, let me say thanks so much for including me in the Clerk's Minute. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with your folks, and I appreciate your friendship and leadership in the Clerk's office as we've worked together since August of 2019 when I was ultimately appointed. I have a wonderful job, and I'm really blessed that the Supreme Court asked me to serve in this position. I've been a judge for about 14 years. I've served in the four major departments of the court, and really loved being a judge. It's a wonderful job, and it's an honor to serve the community in that capacity. This current position is very much not a judging job. It is really more of a chief executive officer job. This, of course, is the fourth largest trial court in the United States. We have roughly 3,200 employees in the judicial branch. As the presiding judge, I oversee the work of the Superior Court, the Adult Probation Office, the Juvenile Probation Office, which includes a juvenile detention center. And I have oversight responsibilities on behalf of the Supreme Court for 26 justice courts and the 17 municipal courts in Maricopa County. The job ultimately has more components than I could accurately describe in the amount of time we have, but I would say from a basic day-to-day function, it is making sure that the people who work in this organization have the tools necessary to do their jobs. And I spend some time every day either working to improve those tools or to develop those tools and to really see how it is that we can help the good folks in this organization do their job more effectively. A significant component of the job prior to the pandemic was, in fact, crisis management. It is a large organization. Something is always amiss in an organization of this size, and it requires a degree of leadership to navigate and to right the ship and to learn from mistakes and to constantly improve. Probably the third component, which I think my court administrator would call mission and vision, is really always looking at what are our functions, how can we perform those functions better, and do we have a larger role that we ought to be taking on, and how do we grow, and how do we best serve our court customers. So those are probably the three largest components. Obviously, during the course of the pandemic, the crisis management piece got a little bigger than the others, but clearly we evolved in the tools that we are using to do our job, so that occupied a fair amount of time too. And honestly, as everybody looks forward to when the pandemic is over, I'm excited about the opportunities that are presented in the mission and vision category, because there are wonderful things that we can do with this organization. The last thing I'll say is, as the head of the organization, as the point of contact for the organization, as the spokesperson for the organization, my last primary job is to interact with stakeholders. As everybody knows, the clerk is a separately elected official, and while it serves the Superior Court, it's a separate office. And so I have the pleasure of meeting with Jeff every month to work through common issues and to make sure we're effectively working together and providing good customer service between the clerk services and the court services. And I have similar interactions with all of our stakeholders, whether it be the county attorney, the attorney general, public defense, the folks in the child welfare side of the house, the numerous stakeholders in juvenile court, our civil practitioners to look at constant civil innovations. So we work very closely, not simply within our own very large organization, but outside stakeholders who are absolutely critical to what it is that we do, and our work, we understand, is critical to what they do.
Judge, I just want to thank you for the collaboration and the partnership that you described. I feel exactly the same way. And although our organizations work closely, I don't think we've ever worked more closely, or it's been more important to work closely than what we've experienced during the pandemic. The pandemic obviously created some challenges in society and in business as to how we operate. For example, here at the clerk's office, many of our services are public facing, and while our counters remained open, we accelerated initiatives to provide more services remotely and online for individuals who may be hesitant to come down to our counters during the pandemic. In your experience, Judge, what challenges did the judicial branch face at the onset of the pandemic and during the pandemic that you had to deal with?
The challenges were enormous and obvious. Whenever I talk about this, I think I always have to acknowledge everyone throughout the community had these challenges. Restaurants and retail and industry, anything that had a significant face-to-face component had to address how it was that they were going to do operations during the course of an airborne spread pandemic. Now, obviously, some of those entities were less critical government services, and they had the option of sending everybody home and shutting the doors and waiting for things to pass. We provide a unique service. We have constitutional and statutory obligations. While some of our operations provide relatively routine, basic customer service, a significant amount of what we do has to do with public safety, and a significant amount of what we do has to do with sort of maintaining a well-ordered society in conflict resolution. The pandemic didn't stop those conflicts. It didn't stop the necessity of public safety. It didn't stop individuals from being arrested and having to see a judge. It didn't stop the timeframes necessary under the Constitution for people to have their right to have their liberty interests restored. It didn't stop commercial conflicts with critical timing components from happening. It didn't stop the necessity for basic human safety associated with orders of protection and domestic violence. We did not have the option of shutting our doors and waiting for this to pass. At the same time, we had an almost 100% face-to-face business operation. We have about 14,000 people walk through our door every day in a non-pandemic day. And in a matter of weeks, we had to make a determination as to how it is that we were going to balance the safety of the community, the safety of our 3,000 employees, while at the same time recognizing that all those things I just said were going to have to move forward. It was an enormous challenge. And culturally speaking, we are tech friendly in a sense that we manage our cases with complex computer tools. But from a court tradition, we do not conduct online operations. We used video conferences for occasional witnesses, mostly in civil cases that had mostly to do with a party demonstrating that someone truly couldn't travel to court. That was rare. We did not have a robust system for video appearances in court. And we recognized what everyone in society recognized. The only way to avoid face-to-face contact was to go up on online platforms and online court. And we did that very quickly with an off-the-shelf tool. And after a few months had developed a tool with our digital record keeper in conjunction with Microsoft to customize a tool to use for court. We also had a court transparency problem. I think some people take for granted the fact that our courtroom doors are always open and that the public can always come in and watch what it is that we are doing. We do not regard that so much as a source of entertainment, but as a check and balance on how we do our work. Justice is not accomplished in the dark, and whether that's a civil proceeding, a family court proceeding, a juvenile proceeding, a tax proceeding, a probate proceeding, or a criminal trial, with the exception of a handful of circumstances, our doors are open and the public can watch what we do. And the transparency of that is critical. And so if you add, we had to eliminate foot traffic from the courthouse for the safety of the public and the safety of our staff. We had to go up on platforms in order to conduct these hearings. And then we had to come up with a mechanism to make sure that the public could view those hearings anytime they wanted to, whether they asked or not. Those were significant challenges. And we couldn't even stop for a couple of weeks. So they weren't challenges that you could face with, you know, sometime 2 months from now we'll start. It literally was, we had a Monday problem and we were up on platforms on Tuesday. Were we good at it on Tuesday? Probably not. But we were pretty darn adequate by the following Tuesday. And we were as good as anyone in the country a month later. So it was a significant logistical challenge for our technical people to give us the tools. It was a significant challenge for our training people to teach us how to use the tools. And then it was a significant challenge for both our court users within the building and our stakeholders outside the building who essentially had to transform how it is that we do business. Is it perfect? I read an article the other day that said it's not perfect, but frankly, in person wasn't perfect either. It is a system that involves people in conflict. It is not perfection, but for purposes of getting us through a health crisis, I'm proud to say that, but for an instance in one of our buildings, we've not had a document instance of spread within the court facility over the course of 14 months, and absolutely no spread that we could find any evidence of in any court proceeding. So we did effectively continue to do business across all of our benches. And where it is that we had to remain on site and do in person, and I'm specifically talking about criminal jury trials, we were able to re-engineer the inside of a courtroom. mask everyone, distance everyone, plexiglass where we needed plexiglass. And we've conducted, I believe, since November, approximately 80 criminal jury trials. And we've already conducted several civil jury trials and have a robust civil jury trial setting system. And case management 101 is if you want to move your matters, you have to give people certain trial dates. And we've been able to consistently do that throughout the pandemic.
Outstanding. Judge, you mentioned a lot of acceleration, I think similar to what I had described earlier, acceleration of technologies. For example, we've had at the clerk's office, you oversaw and your team oversaw the implementation of technologies to overcome challenges, again, virtually overnight. Is there anything that you believe the court system has learned from this experience that might allow us to serve people better moving forward? Are there any, I know that you and I have served on various committees as, as judicial branch leaders, and sometimes it takes months or years to see change. We've seen probably more change in the past year. I think I've seen more change in the past year than I've seen in probably the last decade in the court system in terms of advancing technology. Is there anything that you think that we've learned that we might be able to help us serve people better moving forward? Will customers see anything new maybe in coming months as we kind of return possibly to a pre-pandemic position in society?
Well, no question about it, and it would be foolish not to look back on the last 14 months and draw learning experiences from it. There's a handful of processes that, as a result of the crisis, we simply got better at. Now, a certain amount of that was overcoming what most people believe to be simply a lack of any institutional momentum. If you'd have told me a handful of these ideas a year ago, I'd have said, from implementation to actual practice, we're looking at 5 or 6 years to move stakeholders and to move institutions to do some of these kinds of things. But we had no choice but to do them, and therefore they evolved. And let me talk about just a couple of things. We began a pre-screening process for jurors that has jurors answer not simply basic biographical questions online, but questions like, do you have a health concern that would prevent you from serving as a jury? And do you have time considerations that would preclude you from serving on a jury? And we got some thoughtful responses to those. And we had a judge every day review those responses and make a determination as to whether a juror ought to be excused for hardship, just as though that juror had shown up for court and answered the question in court and then was later excused. Well, if you do that on the front end, they don't have to drive downtown, they don't have to park, they don't have to come into the building, and you don't have to pay them. If we stop doing that, which we started to do as a result of the pandemic, simply to reduce foot traffic into the building as much as possible. Well, even when we no longer have a concern about an airborne virus and we no longer have a concern for reducing foot traffic, it would be foolish not to save money and to save time by continuing that practice and excusing jurors who cannot serve. It allows us to pick a jury more quickly because we begin with a panel of jurors who have already essentially been, we've weeded out the folks that we know can't serve for time considerations and for health considerations. It allows us to bring a smaller number of folks in to pick the same size jury. So we'll certainly continue that. We all know we're on an online platform. We all know we've moved to online platforms. What are the future of online platforms? The short answer is, as we sit here right now, I don't know. We are talking to stakeholders about that. We are talking to our judicial divisions about that. What has worked? What has not worked? If I had to give a quick answer, I'd say, a status conference that does not involve the taking of evidence will likely be conducted in many courts on online platforms. And why is that the case? Well, because court is expensive. Because lawyers charge from the time they leave their offices to the time they get back to their office. And so you could get charged 2 hours for what's a 15-minute hearing. Some people have to take a half a day off work to make it to a 15-minute hearing, simply to tell a judge whether or not their divorce case is ready to go to trial or not, and how it is that a parent is doing with respect to courses necessary for them in a dependency proceeding, or whether discovery has been completed in a civil case or in a criminal case, and what steps to move forward. There's really no particularly good reason for those folks to show up physically present in front of a judge for a hearing like that. And it saves so much time and so much money and is so much more efficient. It is simply better customer service all the way around. And I'm quite sure we'll hold on to the platforms for at least those sorts of things. Now, to be clear, I think most stakeholders, I think most judicial officers would tell you that if we're going to take evidence, if we're going to take testimony, if we're going to hear from people in person for purposes of logistics, for purposes of giving everybody an opportunity to appropriately question, to check demeanor, to check credibility. It's not that the online platforms don't do that adequately. It's that which is better. In person is probably better, and I suspect for hearings like that, we probably won't be doing extensive online. But, for example, a very expensive expert who lives in New York, who can testify to their findings and who can go through exhibits of their findings before a civil jury, will likely always be testifying remotely in the days to come, simply because we have the technology and it's better and it's less expensive, and it allows civil practitioners to get a handle on court costs in a much better way. So I see us using those tools going forward in a myriad of different ways. And finally, within our own institution, and I know different groups are finding this, it sort of probably depends on how progressive you were at the start. We're a court system. We generally operated in person. We generally didn't do a lot of teleworking. And we have experienced as an employer that teleworking works, that people are productive, that work gets done. Many of our employees have been teleworking, and many will be back at their desks because most of their functions are in-person related. We can cover for each other better, we can collaborate better, but we have a lot of positions where teleworking is beneficial. It is just as productive. It provides a benefit to the employee involved, and it will likely help us in employee retention. And so having had an opportunity to see it work when we previously just didn't think it would, I think that's something that when we do the analysis of our workforce, we're going to allow that much more in many areas of the branch.
Judge, I just want to thank you for sharing that information with our viewers and kind of highlighting what we've all been through here in the judicial branch over the past year or so, and the many advancements. I know that our teams work together on a daily basis. They work together very well, and they're committed to serving our customers and communities. So again, thank you, Judge, for your time today. I'm most appreciative, and to our audience, I want to thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Jeff, thanks so much.